What if I told you that some dogs wait years for owners who never return? That their love is so deep, they'd rather starve than leave the spot where they last saw their human? This is the heartbreaking truth behind 5 dogs whose loyalty defied logic, defied time, and even defied death. Their stories will shatter your heart, but also remind you that love in its purest form has 4 legs and a wagging tail. The bustling Shibuya station was alive with the sounds of clicking heels, rushing commuters, and the distant whistle of trains. Among the crowd, one figure stood out. Not a person, but a golden-brown Akita dog named Hachiko. Every evening, like clockwork, he sat patiently by the ticket gates, his dark, soulful eyes scanning the faces of the disembarking passengers. He was waiting for one person and one person only, his beloved owner, Professor Hidesaburo Ueno. Hachiko had been just a puppy when the professor brought him home, and from that moment, an unbreakable bond formed. Each morning, the loyal Akita would walk with Ueno to Shibuya Station, watching as he disappeared into the sea of commuters. And every evening, without fail, Hachiko would return, tail wagging furiously the moment he spotted his owner's familiar figure stepping off the train. But on May 21st, 1925, the train arrived without him. Professor Ueno had suffered a fatal cerebral hemorrhage while at work. He would never come home again. Hachiko didn't understand. That evening he waited as always, his ears perking up at every approaching footstep. The station emptied, the sky darkened. Still, he stayed. The next day he returned. And the next. And the next. Seasons changed. The sweltering summer sun beat down on his fur, and still he waited. Winter came, coating the station in snow, freezing his paws. Yet he remained. Kind strangers noticed the devoted dog and began bringing him food. Some tried to take him home, but Hachiko always escaped, returning to his post. He wasn't homeless. He was waiting. Years passed. Hachiko's muzzle grew gray, his steps slower, but his resolve never wavered. The station workers, the shopkeepers, even the newspapers began to speak of him, the dog who refused to give up. On March 8, 1935, nearly 10 years after his vigil began, Hachiko was found lifeless on the streets near Shibuya Station. He had died as he had lived, waiting. Today, a bronze statue of Hachiko stands at the very spot where he waited, his gaze forever fixed on the ticket gates. Visitors place flowers at his paws, whispering prayers for loyalty like his. Because Hachiko didn't just wait for a man. He waited for love. And in the end, his love outlasted even time itself. The Edinburgh winter of 1858 was particularly cruel. Ice glazed the cobblestones of Greyfriars Kirkyard, and the wind howled through the crumbling stone angels that watched over the dead. But in the heart of the cemetery, curled atop a fresh grave, lay a small, scruffy Skye Terrier, his body shivering, but his resolve unbroken. His name was Bobby, and he belonged to John Gray. Gray, a night watchman, had raised Bobby from a pup. The two were inseparable, Bobby trotting beside him through the foggy streets, his little paws keeping time with Gray's weary footsteps. When Gray's cough worsened, Bobby stayed pressed against his chest, as if his warmth alone could keep death at bay. It couldn't. On the day they buried Gray, Bobby refused to leave. The gravediggers shooed him away. The priest tried to carry him out. But Bobby always returned, digging at the frozen earth until his paws bled, as though he could burrow his way back to his master. Seasons turned. The townspeople whispered about the graveyard dog, Some threw stones, calling him a bad omen, but others, especially the poor children who played near the kirkyard, sneaked him scraps. The kind-hearted gardener built him a shelter from an overturned crate, but Bobby rarely used it. He preferred the bare earth of Gray's grave, even when snow piled around him like a shroud. Then came the day the law demanded Bobby be taken away. Dogs without owners were considered strays, and strays were to be destroyed. But as the constable approached with his rope, something extraordinary happened. The children of Edinburgh formed a human wall around Bobby. The local aristocrat, Sir William Chambers, stepped forward, and the Lord Provost himself, moved by the dog's devotion, paid for Bobby's license, engraving his collar with the words, "Greyfriars Bobby, from the Lord Provost, 1867, licensed." For 14 years Bobby kept his vigil. Tourists came to see him. Queen Victoria sent a silver collar, but none of it mattered to Bobby. Every night, as the church bell tolled the hour Gray once began his watch, Bobby would lift his head, waiting for a voice that would never call him home. On January 14, 1872, the gardener found Bobby lying still, on the grave, his muzzle resting on his paws as if asleep. He was buried just inside the kirkyard gates, close enough to watch over Gray, but not too close to disturb the consecrated ground. Today, a red granite fountain stands in Bobby's memory, its water bowl always full. Some say if you listen closely at midnight, you can hear the pattering of small, determined paws circling a grave no one else can see. The first night Capitan disappeared, the Guzman family assumed he had run away to die of grief. Their home. In Cordoba, Argentina felt hollow without Miguel, Capitan's beloved owner, who had passed suddenly from a heart attack. The German shepherd had refused to eat since the funeral, pacing the house with whimpers that sounded like questions no one could answer. Then one evening, he vanished. Weeks later, a night watchman at the San Pedro Cemetery made a chilling discovery. As he made his rounds with a flickering flashlight, the beam caught a pair of glowing eyes near a fresh grave. There, curled atop Miguel Guzman's burial plot, lay Capitan, his fur matted with mud, ribs visible beneath his coat, but his head held protectively over the dirt as if standing guard. The caretaker reached out. Capitan growled, low, mournful, but unyielding. This was his place now. 11 years passed. Capitan became a ghostly legend of San Pedro. By day, he'd wander the cemetery's edges, drinking from puddles or accepting scraps from mourners who knew his story. But every sunset without fail, he returned to Miguel's grave, circling 3 times before lying down with a sigh that seemed to say, "I'm still here." The Guzmans tried everything to bring him home. They built a doghouse beside the grave. They brought his favorite blanket. Once they even carried him into their car, only for Capitan to leap from a moving window, sprinting back to the cemetery on bleeding paws. "His soul is buried with Miguel," the old caretaker would say, watching Capitan endure summer storms that turned the grave to mud, and winter nights so cold his water bowl froze solid. In 2018, cemetery workers found Capitan for the last time. His body lay stretched across Miguel's grave, one paw resting on the headstone as if reaching for the name carved there. He was 16. Ancient for a large dog. Veterinarians later confirmed he'd been suffering from advanced arthritis and a failing heart, yet he'd never once abandoned his post. The cemetery granted an exception. Capitan was buried beside Miguel, his collar placed atop the grave. Today, visitors leave dog treats and toys between the two headstones. Some swear they've seen shadowy paw prints leading to Miguel's grave on foggy mornings, as if love could outrun death itself. The first time Carlos Soriani saw the dog, it was lying in a ditch by the road. A mud-streaked, skeletal creature with one ear torn from some forgotten fight. The Italian factory worker paused, then did something reckless in wartime. He shared his meager lunch with a stray. That was November 1941. By Christmas, the terrier mix had become Fido, Latin for faithful, and had transformed Carlo's lonely walks to the Lucchini Steelworks bus stop into something resembling family. Every morning, Fido would trot beside him, waiting until the bus swallowed Carlo's waving figure. Every afternoon at 6:03 p.m., he'd be there when the bus spat him back out, launching himself into Carlo's arms like a furry missile of joy. Then, on December 30th, 1943, the air raid sirens screamed over Borgo San Lorenzo. Fido was waiting at the stop when the Allied bombs fell on the factory. He howled as the ground shook, as black smoke stained the horizon where Carlo should have been. They never found Carlo's body, but Fido kept waiting. For 14 years, through Mussolini's fall and Italy's rebirth, through summers that baked the asphalt and winters that turned puddles to ice, the little dog appeared at 6 p.m. sharp. The bus drivers knew to look for him, sometimes tossing scraps. Neighborhood children drew chalk arrows pointing to Fido's spot. The new factory workers, too young to remember Carlo, would murmur, "Eccolo il paziente." There's the patient, one. His routine never varied. Ears pricked at every engine sound, tail thumping hopefully when a bus door hissed open, then drooping when no Carlo emerged. As years passed, his muzzle whitened and his step stiffened, but his eyes never lost that momentary spark of expectation. On June 9th, 1958, Fido didn't come home. They found him lying at his post, his head still turned toward the road where the 6:03 bus would appear. The entire town shut down for his funeral. School children carried his coffin. The mayor gave a speech about love stronger than war. They buried him where he could forever watch for Carlo, just outside the cemetery gates, facing the bus stop. Today, a bronze statue of Fido stands in Borgo San Lorenzo's Piazza Dante, his gaze fixed down Via Ragionieri where the old bus route ran. The plaque reads, "A Fido, esempio di fedeltà." To Fido, example of faithfulness. The whistle screamed through the Montana Valley as the Great Northern Railway train pulled into Fort Benton Station. On the platform, an old border collie's ears pricked up, his milky eyes straining to see through the steam. Shep had gone nearly deaf, but he still recognized the rhythm of the 1017, the same train that had taken his master away forever. It began in 1936 when Shep's owner, an unnamed sheep herder, fell gravely ill. The man was rushed to a hospital in Great Falls, his casket returning 4 days later on that same train. Shep watched as men carried the wooden box away, whimpering when no one opened it to let his person out. For 2,036 days, Shep kept watch. Rail. Workers grew accustomed to the shaggy dog who met every incoming train. They'd find him sleeping beneath the platform in winter, his fur crusted with ice. In summer, he'd pant in the shade of the station house, never taking his eyes off the tracks. Travelers offered him food, but Shep would only eat after inspecting each disembarking passenger, still hoping for a familiar scent, a remembered voice. Wasn't waiting for just anyone, the station master told reporters. He was waiting for his anyone. Children left water bowls labeled Shep's Cafe. The railroad men built him a doghouse from scrap wood, but nothing could fill the hollow space where his master's hand should have rested on his head. On January 12, 1942, a new engineer took the late run into Fort Benton. No one had told him about the blind, deaf dog who slept near the tracks. Workers found Shep's body at dawn. His paws were stretched toward the eastbound rails, the direction from which his master had last returned. The entire town turned out for his funeral. The high school band played Old Faithful as they buried him on a bluff overlooking the station, his grave marker facing the tracks. But here's what they don't tell you. That same night, the night telegraph, operator swore he heard scratching at the station door. When he looked out, he saw nothing. Just fresh paw prints in the snow leading up to track 1, and to this day, engineers sometimes report seeing a spectral collie trotting alongside their trains near Fort Benton, his tail wagging as if finally greeting someone only he can see. Shep's story became so famous that his obituary ran in the New York Times. But his real legacy lives in the railroad workers who still toss dog biscuits onto Platform 1, just in case one loyal soul is still keeping watch. These 5 dogs taught us that love isn't measured in years, but in the weight of an empty collar, the depth of a paw print left in snow, the space between a last goodbye and a forever wait. If this story moved you, consider adopting a shelter dog. Because every Hachiko, Bobby, Capitan, Fido, and Shep deserves to love and be loved while they still can. If these stories shattered your heart but also filled it with love, hit that like button and subscribe. Because every click helps us share more tales of loyalty that deserve to be heard. Comment below. Which dog story destroyed you the most? Was it Hachiko's decade of waiting, or Shep's final run toward the train? Let's make this a tribute to their love. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that the purest souls walk on 4 legs. Together, we can make sure these legends are never forgotten. Fido was waiting at the stop when the Allied bombs fell on the factory. He howled as the ground shook, as black smoke stained the horizon where Carlo should have been. They never found Carlo's body, but Fido kept waiting. For 14 years, through Mussolini's fall and Italy's rebirth, through summers that baked the asphalt and winters that turned puddles to ice, the little dog appeared at 6 p.m. sharp. The bus drivers knew to look for him, sometimes tossing scraps. Neighborhood children drew chalk arrows pointing to Fido's spot. The new factory workers, too young to remember Carlo, would murmur, "Eccolo il paziente." There's the patient. 1. His routine never varied. Ears pricked at every engine sound, tail thumping hopefully when a bus door hissed open, then drooping when no Carlo emerged. As years passed, his muzzle whitened and his steps stiffened, but his eyes never lost that momentary spark of expectation. On June 9, 1958, Fido didn't come home. They found him lying at his post, his head still turned toward the road where the 603 bus would appear. The entire town shut down for his funeral. School children carried his coffin. The mayor gave a speech about love stronger than war. They buried him where he could forever watch for Carlo, just outside the cemetery gates, facing the bus stop.